with anyone, and I needed to.
We all do it. We want to help the world.
We do. Yeah, I can do anything. And, to some degree, I learned quickly on the fly. My personality is I'll just jump in and figure it out. And we did. And so as I continue to work with folks, I realized I just enjoy doing certain types of work more than others. I wasn't always we used to build websites for folks, and I no longer build those websites. I had a team, and we built the websites, and I led that team. And I just thought, like, this isn't my favorite thing in the world. And you think, oh, websites are storytelling, but a lot of times that's not what the clients were looking for. It was much more of a functional website, and I think we did a great job. They served their purposes. Not to say we'll never do another website. And, we're currently supporting the websites we've already built to sustain that commitment. But I just realized that I just love the consulting work in terms of working one-on-one to develop messaging, to really work through that overarching story. So if you are a nonprofit or a business and you have one sentence to say it, like, what are you going to say? Some people say, they just don't even like talking about their organization because they don't know how to explain it. And that's really where we start. And then going a little deeper into the stories, doing storytelling campaigns, where we share those personal stories out. I'm doing a ghostwriting for a book. So just helping kind of going deeper into, so just going deeper into the specific story and less on sort of the technical side. Even though I understand how all of that work and I've done it before, I just realized coming out of the program, I want to do what I love the best, and I want to bring my best to clients. And that's going to happen when I am really enjoying the work we do.
Love it. Love it. Another bar drop. I think we find out what our zone of genius. Welcome to the Analytical Rewired, the best place to discuss various obstacles, limitations, challenges, behaviors, and how to overcome them in business. We deep dive into the complexities of people, processes, data, and technology, PPDT, adopting our focus to be either technical or creative expressions, and how to balance the two. The Analytical Rewired is brought to you by the MJW Group, a performance improvement and leadership development boutique management consulting firm that helps companies save time and money leveraging operational excellence. Our mission is to enable your organization to be more successful by refining overarching strategies into detailed plans to be implemented, generate creative and technical solutions for your operational challenges, augment and supplement your existing teams, and help you create processes that allow you to be more efficient with the resources you have. You can learn more about the MJW Group on our website at themjwgrp.com. Welcome to the Analytical Rewired. I am your host, Jennifer White, CEO of the MJW Group, and I have a special guest with me here today, Mackenzie Walters. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. I'm glad you're here, and you have quite a story to tell. And I emphasize stories as the audience will hear in a little bit about Mackenzie and her background and what she does. So Mackenzie, why don't you go ahead and introduce who you are and what you do?
Sure. So I own Storystruck Marketing. It's a marketing consulting company that primarily helps nonprofits as well as some businesses tell their story. So connecting with more of the emotional side through a true first-person story. And I also host the Nonprofit Storytellers podcast because we work with so many nonprofits. I decided I really wanted to have a resource so folks could hear from each other. So we interview college presidents and fundraising development managers and marketing managers and folks who are actually working in the nonprofit and ask them, how do you tell your story and what is being successful today? So it's just really a lot of fun to be able to lift up these stories and help folks share them out in a new or different way.
Ooh, Ooh, I'm interested in hearing more about that because there's a lot of nonprofits out here and they all have a mission, they all have a purpose, right? So I'm interested to see how you help them unravel that to be able to tell their story in a very unique and creative way. So, Mackenzie, where are you located?
I live in Des Moines, Iowa, so right smack in the middle of the country. I have lived all over though. So I'm originally from Minnesota. That's where I was born and raised. Went to college out in Washington, D.C., worked really
Oh,
briefly in Maryland, Frederick, Maryland, moved back to Minnesota to work for a daily newspaper, moved to Oregon. Then I moved to Florida to continue to work for a daily newspaper. And then I finally moved to Des Moines, where I worked for another daily newspaper. At that time, I had 14 years of experience as a journalist. I had worked all over the country, covered all kinds of stories. And I left that career in 2019 to start my business and just really take what I had learned as a journalist, the interviewing process, the honing in on the one piece of the story you wanted people to know and bring it to nonprofits and businesses to help them use that skill set.
wow. Yeah, I thought I moved a lot in my career. I'm only for four.
Oh, where have you lived?
I grew up in Clearwater, Florida. I left there, went to school in Orlando at UCF. Then
Yeah.
I moved to Atlanta, Georgia. We moved to some other smaller towns in Georgia as well. And then we moved to Charlotte. So, yeah, I've got like four moves under my belt.
When I lived in Florida, I lived in Melbourne, which is just east of
Yeah.
Orlando. So it's a great campus, great community. It was a lot of fun living there.
It's grown a lot there now. When I
It
was
is.
out there at school, it was hardly anything besides like everyone that worked at the Cape or I think Harris Corporation.
Yeah,
Because I remember some of our professors worked at Harris. So interesting. Such a small world. That's
it is.
awesome. I mean, you're very, what do we call that? You're a well domestic traveler. I don't know. I'm making that up. But
Yeah,
that
just
is,
just on
yeah.
a tangent, I drove every time I moved. So I have driven through, I think I'm at 46 states right now. I'm missing Alaska and sort of the eastern, like Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, but I've been to every other state, which is really fun because our country is so big and so diverse. And just the regions have their own culture
They
and
do.
it's just so interesting to be able to experience that in different ways.
Wow, that's interesting. Hopefully you have a map with the pins and like everywhere you've been. That's pretty cool. Oh my gosh, I need to get out more. I keep saying I need to go out west. I just want to drive out west. Like I don't want to fly. I want to do the whole road thing and just drive out west and just see everything. Wow, that's amazing.
The great thing about driving west, and I've done a few road trips that way, is you chase the sunset. You can see the sunset for like an hour sometimes because you are driving
Right.
west right when it's going down, and it's beautiful.
Wow. See, stories. See what I'm saying? Oh my gosh, I wish I could do that. Obviously, I'm more left brain, like the analytical one in me is just all about ones and zeros. And I'm trying, I'm so trying to be more colorful and tell stories. And I tell the story through data. I love doing that. But just the way you explain your whole life story like that, man, I wish I could do that. It's hard for me.
Well, I actually believe that everyone can tell stories. It's a skill, just like learning math is a skill. You don't understand out of the box, or I should say when you're born, how to do multiplication or how to do division. I mean, you're taught that and you can learn how to tell a
Mhm.
story as well. So when I teach storytelling or I work with folks, a lot of times I'm asking them, well, what is the main thing you want to say? Starting with the end in mind. So after you have the data, after you have all of the things, say, what is the main point of the story? What is the story anchor? And then once you have that, you can construct the beginning, the middle where something changes, and the ending that gets you to that point of the message. And once you do that, and there's a deeper process, but once you walk through those steps, a lot of times it becomes clear what to say and what to leave out.
Yeah, you know what? You're right. Because as you're explaining that, I'm sitting here thinking about we're working on a couple of RFPs right now. And that's exactly what we do. We always start with the outcome, like what we're trying to solve for. And then we kind of reverse engineer and work our way backwards. So, yeah, you're right. That's interesting. Hmm.
When I was a reporter and I did some crazy stories, some really big stories, and I would gather all of this information, like pages and pages and pages of notes and material and public records. And I had to say, okay, what is this story in one or two sentences? And once I
Mhm.
could say that, then it's like I almost had to narrow it down to one or two sentences, and then I could expand it out into the story that I wanted to construct. Because once you understand that outcome or what you want to say, then you have agency over the story and you can decide what to include and what makes sense for the audience. And that's
Right.
probably what you're doing with your RFPs.
Yes, you're right.
But it
Jennifer,
is
get it together.
it is not unusual. And it's so funny because I work with nonprofits and businesses all the time who they know they have a story, but they just don't know how to do it. Or even if they have a story, sometimes we've worked for folks who have worked with other storytellers in the past, but they're not sure how to get the story out. So you not only have to share the story, but also you have to market it,
Yeah.
and get it out into the audience's hands. And it's sort of a skill set that we help folks develop either through planning. Sometimes we'll do coaching. Sometimes I'll just write the story myself or work with a videographer to do the story, and then we help them share it out so that they can use the value. You can really move people through a story.
I love that. And I want to get into that here in just a sec. But first, I want to talk about how you and I met because we are part of a collective of alumni, right? The Goldman Sachs 10K SB program. And we didn't know each other, although we were in the program, we didn't know each other. There was another acquaintance that brought us together, and we chatted a couple of months back, or maybe it's been a couple of weeks now, and we just said we would keep in touch, and I invited you to be on a podcast here. But that's a story in itself because when I became a business owner, I didn't realize how much I would need to lean into doing that just by networking. And especially half of the lifetime of my company being in business was engulfed in COVID at the time. So I had to pivot really fast. With keeping the lights on rather via networking. And when COVID happened, that's when I learned how to really use both sides of my brain to relate to other people, to build that awareness and that attraction right to our company. So talk about that a little bit, how that maturity, right? Of us as a people, like how we have to network, how we have to discuss our story or get out there when you can't be in person. That's what I'm getting at. Like we totally couldn't be in person. So everything we thought we knew totally shifted.
It really does. And I think with online networking, which is what I think you're asking about, I have found if you can find a common piece or introduction. I mean, sometimes this is a sales tactic, right? You're trying to find a common thread or something that you would relate to. So
Yeah.
I know when I have reached out to folks on LinkedIn, I often ask, hey, so and so, I think we both know the same person, or we both went to the same college, or I see that you're doing this. And actually the podcast has been great because as a journalist, I love meeting people and I love inviting people onto the Nonprofit Storytellers
Mhm.
podcast. And it's a value to them because they're sharing their story with an audience. And it's a great way to meet people and connect when you can't meet in person. What I have found so helpful about the 10,000 Small Businesses program that we both went through is the community. And
Mhm.
because we have that common thread, we both went through the same program, even though we're in two different states. We really connected once we met and were introduced. And I just think that's really the basis of relationships is
Mhm.
finding that common ground and
The
potentially a common
foundation.
experience if you have one.
Yeah, I can see that. It's interesting you say that common thread, because I guess for the many folks that have gone through 10K SB now, they're way over 10,000 graduates now. They need to change the name. But we all experience the the glorious opportunities and pain of being a business owner. Let me put it that way. It's not a steady line in on this journey. There's so many bumps and hills and just walls to climb through, and it's good to be able to like just pick up the phone and call someone and say, hey, can we talk for a second? I'm going to bounce this off of you, or I'm dealing with this kind of issue. Have you dealt with something like this before? Versus, just being in a black hole and like, not knowing who to go to. So you're right, it is, I think, for me, that commonality exists that way, where we can relate because we do face similar issues as a small business owner.
And the program was great because we worked in small groups, those small cohorts, where I forget what they called them, but we had a really small one. There was like 3 other people, and we met weekly, and we said, am I might look good on my website and I might present myself well, but man, I am really struggling in this area and I could
Yeah.
be vulnerable. And that vulnerability really connects people because, and I share this when I teach storytelling is, when I was a journalist, we called it the wart of the story. So whenever we did a story about a prominent person or whatever, we were always looking for a wart, which is not necessarily to say a scandalous detail or something that you did wrong, but something that made you human, something that made you seem relatable, because none of us are perfect. And sometimes in business, you kind of have to feel like you have to show that you have it all together.
Mm.
And once people let their guard down and said, hey, I don't have it all figured out, I'm really good in these areas, but not so great over here, I felt like we really came together, which was so
Yeah.
amazing to see.
Yeah, you're exactly right. That vulnerability, authenticity, just letting your guard down, it amplifies when we saw each other in person finally. Because my cohort, we met all through Zoom, and I think it was Growth Group. Was that the name of our
I
little
think you're right. The growth group.
pods or
Yeah.
something? Yeah. And so when we finally got together, it was like, I mean, it was like fanboy and fangirl all over. It was interesting. But yeah, I agree with what you're saying wholeheartedly, being able to connect that way. And you brought up something interesting about, it sounds like you were saying how we used to do things when you were a journalist. So, and you're smiling. So please, how have these things changed in the industry that you're in?
Well, yeah. So, I mean, it's a big question. When I was a journalist, it was a little different, right? Because I was not advocating. I took that very seriously for any one side. I know
Yeah.
that's not always the perception today in the media. And I really took that charge seriously. I signed an ethics agreement and everything like that. Now that I'm a marketer, I'm sort of on the other side, where I am advocating a lot of times on behalf of a business or trying to make a certain point or helping people make a sale, or in the nonprofit space, helping get donations or even getting people into the programs is a form of marketing in that area. And so it is a little bit different, but at the same time, I think that you're seeing a lot of interest in storytelling as a marketing vehicle. It's not journalism because you're not necessarily trying to share both sides. You're trying to
Mhm.
share your side, but at the same time, there's
Yeah.
a lot of value to that. And I think that when I look at other organizations, especially B2B organizations, where you are an expert in a certain area and you are able to share that story in a way that relates to someone who's not an expert, and you're answering their questions before they're asked, and you're able to take something complex and explain it in a way that they understand, maybe bring them through a case study, it really relates them to their own life and can bring just tremendous value. So it's a little hard for me because I spent 14 years as a journalist, and I was very careful to never make a political statement, and I was very careful to be on both
Mhm.
sides of, or as many sides as there were in a story. And now in the marketing space, that's not always true, but at the same time, all of those skills transfer over. And so that has been really wonderful. There's fewer and fewer journalists out there. The newsrooms are shrinking. And so I'm just really thankful that I was able to leave the industry when I did, and then also launch a business and start in an industry that was really looking for that storytelling skill set.
Wow. Bars, gems, nuggets, diamonds. I hope everyone's hearing what Mackenzie is saying, because oh my gosh, my heart is like it's like beating so hard right now, because you're right. Like, there's been a shift. There aren't those journalists. Just like I've been saying recently, I don't see good, what's the word I'm gonna use? I don't offend anybody. Just
Objective.
people's, yes, I need to be objective here, not subjective. Just people-centered human beings. Like, where did we go? I don't know. It's hard. Like, you can't even walk up to random strangers and just say, "Hi, how are you doing? How's your day?" without somebody like, "Leave me alone," like, like screaming. And I think it's hard for people just to have conversations nowadays, or without technology being in the mix. Technology is great, right? It's supposed to ease our quality of life, but I think now, especially with this AI that we have, and it's really impacting your field now. I don't want to call the name of it, but I think people aren't utilizing it the right way. And I fear like we're going down a road that's going to cause havoc, and then we'll realize what we've done, and then we'll course correct probably in 20 years or so. That's just
Especially,
my thought.
yeah, no, I don't know the outcome, but I know that I'm feeling the same thing, especially on social media. I'm actually
Yeah.
giving a presentation on at a conference locally on social media and just the changes. So at one point, you might have 10 or 12 or 15% of people who like you on Facebook see a post. Now it's down to like 4%.
Yeah.
It's very similarly low on other platforms. And the algorithm is really playing into some of the discord. So what you're seeing people do to try to get their message out is a lot of times they're selecting a polarizing message. It's not to say it's inauthentic to them. I mean, a lot of times that's how they think, and they are sharing that out instead of maybe keeping it to themselves. And that can be on both sides, right? And I think that we've seen that with some of the ad campaigns that have come out and sparked some controversy. I think that on social media, partnerships are really important as well. So who you're aligning yourself with. And then the ad spend, I mean, it's amazing what is needed to get out on social media now. And I hate to say it, but that's the distribution channel for a lot of stories. It's how a lot of people get their news, not all of them. But when I've done market research, we ask like, where do you get your news is a question we like to ask. And I've had people say, well, I get it on Facebook, or how often
Yeah.
have I said, well, I saw it on Instagram. And so it's just very different than when I was a young journalist and I physically picked up and read the newspaper that was delivered to my door. It's so different. Same with radio. I used to listen to NPR in the morning to catch the morning news before I drove into the newsroom for the day. And I rarely have a radio on anymore. I listen to podcasts. It's just become very, you don't have this serendipity that you used to with the newspaper, where you would open the newspaper and there would be 50 different stories or 30 different stories. And they were all kinds of walks of life. Some were hard news, some were crime, some were politics, some were fun feature stories about a community member doing good work. I mean, it was just all over the board. And now you have much more isolated, narrow distribution where it's really feeding into kind of your belief set and your current viewpoints, and that's how people are reaching you. There's a great documentary on Netflix, and now of course I'm forgetting the name of it, but it's about the shift in the algorithm on Facebook and how that polarization has happened. I'll try to look it up here real quick and try to mention it.
Seen that. Is it social something?
Yes, I think
Is
so.
that the one? Okay. Yeah, I remember that documentary, and you're right. And I think our generation, because I'm assuming you and I are of a similar age, because it's a little
It's
different
called
from.
The Social Dilemma.
Yes, I did see that. Because I have this conversation with my parents all the time. It's like when I'm with them, they're always watching the news. And I'm just like, oh my God, can we stop watching the news? And then my mom's like, well, you're gonna miss something. I'm like, I won't miss anything. Trust me, because either you will tell me or I will pick up my phone. And as soon as I get on any of these social channels, it's gonna be right there. If it's that big enough, it's gonna be right there. Trust me.
I actually feel that way about the weather here in Iowa before the show. We live in the middle of the country, so sometimes we get hit hard from the north or the west or the south, and you can have snow and then 70 degrees on the same day. It's crazy. And Tornado Alley, and I never look at the weather reports because someone is going to tell me. I have
Yeah.
walked into a convenience store and they're like, "Hey, have you heard about the weather coming in?" And I'm like, "No, I haven't, but now I know." I mean, that used to be the way word traveled, and it's very different nowadays.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So I'm interested as to why you chose to help or serve nonprofits, Mackenzie. What was it about nonprofits? Has it always been nonprofits, or have you served large enterprise or middle market clients as well?
I've done a little bit of both. When I started off, it was a little different. I had signed an ethics agreement with the newspaper I was working for at the time, and I
Mhm.
wasn't able to take or solicit finances or financial, so you weren't being
Yeah.
influenced. And so I took that very seriously. And so I launched my business after I quit and had the savings account. So I was just like, I'll freelance for anyone. And that really morphed. So I've done businesses, I've done large, I've done small, I've done mid-size. What I love about nonprofits is they probably have the most compelling stories to share. If you really look about the transformations that they are making and helping, whether they're helping stop human trafficking to helping individuals in our community find food through the food
Mhm.
bank or fight food insecurity, if they're helping people get an education like our colleges or healthcare, a lot of times are nonprofits. At least in Iowa, the statistic I heard was that 1 in 11 people work in a nonprofit. So it's a
Hmm.
huge sector of our economy that we might not
Did
realize.
not know that.
If you think about all of the different organizations that are designated as nonprofits. And so I was drawn initially to the story and really wanted and really felt like when I work with a nonprofit, I'm really helping the community, which is why I wanted to be a journalist. I wanted to help the community with knowing information and sharing information. And so as I have been in business now for a while, I just keep getting deeper and deeper into the nonprofit space.
Yeah.
With launching the Nonprofit Storytellers podcast, I've really been able to not just help nonprofits through the work I do directly with them, but I've heard from listeners who are saying, "Hey, I learned something today that I can apply." And I realize that not everyone has a budget for marketing strategy or has a budget to hire a consultant, but if they can take something away from the nonprofit and apply it, and I try to interview folks who are large or college presidents and small, as well as running small nonprofits with limited budgets, so that there's something for everyone. And I really hope that folks
Mhm.
understand there's so many ways to tell your story, but also there are sort of an intentionality behind storytelling. So sometimes we run into people who could talk for an hour about their nonprofit, but that might overwhelm some people, right? Or they have a great story, but they feel like they're the best kept secret in town, and so that's not acceptable either. And so you want people to know the work that you're doing. So I still work with businesses. I'm doing some ghost writing currently and helping people tell their story in that capacity. But then I just
Mhm.
really love kind of doing the marketing for the nonprofits in more of a overarching capacity.
Nice, nice. Are there any specific industries of nonprofits that you tend to gravitate towards more than others?
Yeah, so it's actually I'm open to almost all nonprofits except political.
Okay.
So I love working with different types of nonprofits, different sectors. It could be health or education or youth services, with immigrants and refugees, whatever that need is. Associations, if they have a membership in associations. Just because of my background in politics as a journalist, I just feel like I got burnt out in that world with covering
Yeah.
politics. And so I do tend to shy away from politically oriented nonprofits who are, and I live in Iowa. And so the context is we have a presidential race that is kicked off here, and we have presidential candidates that are spending money here, and they have nonprofits that are trying to sway people to vote or push certain issues. So
Oh,
it's actually an intentional decision just to say, hey, I would rather just be a citizen participating in the process than advocating
right.
on one or the other's behalf. I'd rather work more on the ground in the community with community members that are going to be here long after the Iowa caucuses, and help people who live here and work here and can build
Mhm.
a life here.
Understood. Understood. Well, that's good to know. We work with a couple of nonprofits here in our area here in Charlotte, and I think there's some connections that we need to make because I know they could definitely utilize someone like you to help them tell their story. For us, like we always like to be attached to STEM type of nonprofits because we're primarily engineers, right? We love the STEM curriculums and education, of course, and we tend to partner with nonprofits that are um, doing like food drives, pantry drives as well, because believe it or not, there is a lot of people with the cost of food right now.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that need help. And I was shocked when we started working with this organization, like how much is needed to do a food drive and service, people just in our area. I was astounded by the numbers. So yeah, I do think I can introduce you to a couple of folks in my network as well. And like I said, they could definitely utilize you to be able to tell their story, because you're right, sometimes it feels like they're hidden, and I always wonder with the ones that's been around for a long time, like how they continue to get their story out or change their story a little bit over time.
Yeah, and it really depends on the organization. I mean, there are a number of nonprofits in every state that are grant dependent. And so they
Mm,
are primarily funded through grants. And I would argue that you also want to be funded through the community and through fundraising. And so you want that diversity of funds. And so sharing, so they might never have really needed to share their story, or they've gotten along just fine. And grant writing is a beast of a process. And I'm so glad that there are people who specialize in that.
yeah,
That is not me. But when we work with nonprofits, a lot of times they have been very reliant on grants, and they want to try to diversify their revenue stream. And the first step is just telling people, "Hey, we're here, we exist,
right.
we've been working for decades," and sharing that story.
Awesome, awesome. So as we wrap up here, Mackenzie, you've been in business for a couple of years now. You've seen the shifts, you've experienced the ebbs and flows. Now, what would you say out of that is, well, it's probably hard to say one thing, but what is one thing that you've totally rewired about how you approach your businesses or the services that you provide?
Yes. So I am a fan of specializing, and that was not always the case. That was actually one of the things I took away from the 10,000 Small Business Program.
Mm,
Because when I started, I said, hey, I will work with anyone. And I needed to.
we all do it.
And
We want to help the world.
we do. Yeah, I can do anything. And, to some degree, I learned quickly on the flat. My personality is I'll just jump in and figure it out. And we did. And so as I continue to work with folks, I realized I just enjoy doing certain types of work more than others. I wasn't always, we used to build websites for folks, and I no longer build those websites. I had a team, and we built
Yeah.
the websites, and I led that team. And I just thought, like, this isn't my favorite thing in the world. And you think, oh, websites are storytelling, but a lot of times that's not what the clients were looking for. It was much
Mm,
more of a functional website, and I think we did a great job. They served their purposes. Not to say we'll never do another website, and we're currently supporting the websites we've already built to sustain that commitment. But I just realized that I just love the consulting work in terms of working one-on-one to develop messaging, to really work through that overarching story. So if you are a
Mhm.
nonprofit or a business and you have one sentence to say it, like, what are you going to say? Some people say, they just don't even like talking about their organization because they don't know how to explain it. And that's really where we start. And then going a little deeper into the stories, doing storytelling campaigns, where we share those personal stories out. I'm doing a ghostwriting for a book. So just helping kind of going deeper
Cool.
into, yeah, so just going deeper into the specific story and less on sort of the technical side. Even though I understand how all of that work and I've done it before, I just realized coming out of the program, you know, I want to do what I love the best and I want to bring
Yes.
my best to clients. And that's going to happen when I am really enjoying the work we do.
Love it. Love it. Another bar drop. Yay. Yeah,
You're so
I think we find out what our zone of genius is, but you're right. When we
way
first
to say
start
it.
out, we're like, I want to conquer the world and I have so much to give and so much to offer. And then you're after a while, you're like, oh my God, I can't do this anymore.
It's this, how do you make it sustainable, right? Like,
I'm
yeah,
only one person.
my one of my first editors, John Badat, he was an editor up in St. Cloud, Minnesota, little tiny newspaper on the prairie. And I mean, they were sending reporters to Afghanistan to cover the war in Iraq. And you're like, this is a tiny newspaper in, the farm fields of Minnesota. Like, how are you doing this?
Oh my gosh.
And he just always said, this is a marathon. This isn't a sprint. We do it one step at a time
Mm.
and we train for it and we know it's an endurance. And so, I thought a lot about that. Like, what can I sustain over
Mhm.
time as a business owner? And what feels more like a sprint to me, but then I'm totally wiped out at the end and I don't have any more energy left. And so that was a great metaphor, not just in my journalism career, but also as I've kind of moved through life and had to make choices because I hate,
Yeah,
you get to the point where you're like, but they're both good options. What do I do? But you have to make a choice,
you
So
do. You
that's
do.
been the hard part about business ownership, but it's also been very rewarding, as I'm sure you can attest with all of that you have accomplished.
Yeah, one day the light bulb just you open one door one day and then it just goes like you're like, I get it. I get it. I get it. I get it. And I have a very good another business owner friend of mine. She always says, Jennifer, there's riches in the niches. And I'm like, you got a point there, girl. You got a point. You're right.
I like
So
that.
I've been following that for like 2 years now. I'm like, she's right. There really is. But you think like you're gonna repel people, and it's like, no, you learn to attract those people that have what you really want. So when you get to the point where it's because time and money and budget, it's always a thing. It's like they're ready to go. There's no resistance, there's no contention. They're ready to go. They're your people. They're ready to work.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's so true. It's so
Yeah.
true.
Well, this was awesome, Mackenzie. I'm so glad you were a guest today. Thank you for joining us. Is there anything you wanted to leave with the audience? I didn't know if you had like a discount code for services or people can reach out to you to have like a quick call.
Sure. So I'd love for folks to go to my website, which is storystruckmarketing.com. Would love to chat with you. You can read a little bit more about our services. And then if you are in the nonprofit space or if you support a nonprofit as a board member or an active volunteer, I'd really encourage you to check out nonprofit-storytellers.com. That's nonprofit-storytellers.com. That's where we post all of their podcasts. We also have short transcripts as well as articles that showcase different campaigns that nonprofits have done. So you can get inspiration and kind of keep up with how others are doing their work. The best way to keep up is by signing up for that newsletter. It's a free resource that we're putting out there. It's my journalism of the nonprofit industry, to share kind of best practices and tips and real world examples of how people are making a difference.
Awesome. And is there any other channels people can reach out to you or just head to the website?
The website would be the best to check out our context. And then you can always find me at LinkedIn. I am pretty active at
Of
Mackenzie
course.
Walters. Yeah. So I do enjoy LinkedIn. It's so funny how your social media habits change over time. Because at one point, all I did was Facebook, and then I was on Twitter as a journalist, and that was my primary domain. And then I'm not doing Twitter almost at all anymore. And I'm on LinkedIn for my business and Instagram for personal. So it's really changed those,
Yeah.
and the demographic I'm in and how I connect with content. So LinkedIn seems to be the best source for me as a business owner and someone who's helping nonprofits.
Awesome. So everyone make sure to connect with Mackenzie on her website or on LinkedIn. Again, Mackenzie, thank you so much for being a guest here on the Analytical Rewired. Everyone, make sure you like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and we'll catch you on the next episode. Thanks. Bye.